think in this room there's about 40.
On today's show, we'll meet an avid pheasant hunter who has taken his love of pheasants one step further than most. He has a pheasant shrine in his home.
This was really the edge of the fire.
And we take a look back at the wildfires that raged through the Boundary Waters and the changes that are happening to the landscape. And what's wild in the kitchen? Daughter Laura has found a venison chili recipe that'll keep you warm this winter. And later, our classic takes us back to the blue waters of Mexico. It's time again for the bass of El Salto. Those stories and more, next.
There ain't anything like it.
All right.
Minnesota's select GMC dealers present Minnesota Bound. From the North Country, here's Ron Schara and Raven, the Black Lamb.
Hi everybody, Raven and I welcome you to the show. You know, we all love the ringneck pheasant, at least I do, Raven does. A most beautiful bird, probably the most beautiful bird in the world. But you're about to meet a couple who I would say are pheasant crazy. Home, it's said, is where the heart is, especially if the heart loves ringneck pheasants.
This is one of the rooms where we have the pheasant collection. It's pretty obvious. We call this the pheasant room.
A pheasant room? A ringneck roundup?
Well, one of my favorite things now is the sun catcher.
I see pheasant art here. I see pheasant pillows, pheasant blankets, pheasant statues, pheasant signs. Have you ever counted all the pheasant items you've got here?
I think in this room there's about 40.
Oh,
but
really?
this is only about half of it.
When did this all start for your pheasant?
A couple items go back 40 to 50 years, but most of it I accumulated in the last 15 years. I started to collect stuff, and pheasants are such a beautiful bird. I mean, you couldn't design a more beautiful bird.
It doesn't bother me at all because I collect Labrador Retriever paraphernalia. So I think Claire and I kind of balance each other out.
And the two labs, Toddy and Dory, of course, are, well, pheasant dogs.
So I've been hunting pheasants, Ron, for 57 years. Minus 4 years, 4.5 years of military service. Never get tired of seeing a beautiful rooster flush. It's a real rush.
How did your relationship with pheasants begin?
Well, I was a younger brother. My older brother, he liked to hunt. He was a real outdoorsman. He liked to hunt a lot. So when I was 12 years old, I was allowed to get a shotgun. So I would tag along behind him. And that kind of started my love of the birds, of the pheasants. This is a print.
Flock after flock, room after room.
Okay, so this is the other pheasant area. This is my office.
Wow.
Where I've also got a lot of pheasant items.
That's an understatement.
It is. I think there's between 80 and 100 total items.
Do you have a favorite in this room?
Well, I'd have to say this clock is one, and then this pheasant right here.
How old did you say that pheasant was?
I'd say between 45 years old, probably. You remember Schmidt,
Yes.
the Schmidt beer cans?
Now, is he still in the hunt for more pheasants?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if we really have a goal. Fill up all the wall space could be considered a goal. And, but you know, at some point I'm going to have to stop. But if I see something that's pretty unique, I'll buy it. I'll buy it. I have a hard time saying no. No, I don't think about the value at all. Maybe there's some of the items do have quite a bit of value, like the pheasant bourbon bottle that might be worth some money. But no, I don't think about the value. I just think I just like to collect pheasant things.
In a home where your heart is.
As you can
see the thousands and thousands of seeds that have been released.
Up next, we take a look at how Mother Nature is taking care of business after the wildfires in the Boundary Waters.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Minnesota's select GMC dealers. Renewal by Anderson, makers of quality replacement windows and doors. Connecticut, better water flows from better thinking. And by Rapala. Catch the latest at rapala.com.
Welcome back. We all remember the tragedy of that huge forest fire in the Boundary Waters. But sometimes fire is not as bad as it seems afterwards. Our man about the woods, Bill Shirk, went back to take a look.
By now, most folks around these parts have heard of the Pagami Creek Fire, a lightning-sparked wildfire that started east of Ely, Minnesota. The windswept flames burned for 2 months, charring more than 90,000 acres in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. The fire proved the biggest BWCA fire on record. But that was then, and this is now.
Wow, look at that.
We are driving right on the edge of the Boundary Waters. I mean, literally, it's right there, and it's almost overwhelming.
In February, we visited the south end of the burn area right on Isabella Lake, a chance to just kind of look around.
But really, where we are here, this was the end of it.
This was really the edge of the fire.
That's Carl Skustad and Patty Johnson. Both worked for the U.S. Forest Service and both agreed to give us a little education on this fire.
This point,
Yeah.
why did that not burn?
Well, that's a riparian area that was lower down and closer to the water.
Most Boundary Waters entry points around the burn still sit blocked off. The danger comes from all the burned trees, what old-timers call widowmakers.
All the trees will eventually just topple over and, fall down and decay, but a lot of them will stand for a number of years yet.
The Forest Service right now has crews in working to get those danger trees out of the way.
On Lake 4, removing hazard trees, all cross-cut activity in the wilderness, so very labor-intensive, 3 or 4 days per campsite to remove that many trees.
Sled dog teams have been hauling in supplies to workers.
We're going to get some of those more heavily traveled corridors opened. Not every campsite will be open right away, but if it's sign closed, move on to the next one.
Now, part of the reason the fire burned so intensely was, of course, all the wind. But you have to remember, much of the Boundary Waters is old forest growth.
It was getting pretty old. It hadn't seen fire in over 100 years. So you've had a pretty decadent forest that was sitting there waiting for the fire to come.
In that, a little good news. Look up and you'll see all the blackened pine trees.
In the tops of all these trees, you can see the thousands and thousands of seeds that have been released from the jack pine as a result of the fire.
Just up the road, the town of Ely. The fire and this tourism town sure made headlines.
There was a lot of pictures of big flames. I mean, there were newspapers in Wisconsin saying Ely was on fire. Not true.
We sat down with local Boundary Waters guides John Scheffelbein and Jason Zaborski.
I certainly intend to encourage that area for the ones who want to see it. After Yellowstone, their big fire, the following year they had the biggest tourism season they ever had.
A lot of our guests are first-timers to the Boundary Waters, and a lot of those folks haven't even heard of it. So we're actually telling it to them for the first time.
And like the Forest Service folks, these guys are excited to watch the regrowth.
So it's going to be a really eventful blueberry situation out there come, the future Julys in the burn area.
It's actually a light use area. It's the heaviest concentration of moose in the lower 48.
Last fall, we watched fire. Now, we get to view the next great chapter, a wilderness that, over time, recreates itself.
It's a very dramatic, drastic scene
for folks. It's going to be great to experience that and watch people experience that.
Sizzle when the meat goes in.
What to do with that venison in the freezer? Daughter Laura comes up with a warm recipe idea.
The jalapeno and the...
Closed captioning is brought to you by the Yard, premier manufacturers of maintenance-free outdoor patio furniture and accessories from recycled plastic.
A question, what do you do with that venison in the freezer? Well, my daughter Laura and Chef Jim have found the answer.
Today we're getting wild in the kitchen with Jim Kinberg, who's the culinary director of Crave Restaurants. And Jim, it is now January, and we know that in January many of us are trying to take off those maybe 5, hopefully not 10 pounds we put on over the holiday season, right?
Correct.
And we're making a really healthy recipe with venison today.
We are. So venison, as you know, is a very lean meat. We're going to be actually making chili today. So great warmer-upper for that cold months ahead.
So let's get started.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do is take our venison. You can either use ground venison or you can take venison steaks, roast, chop them up really nice and fine. And we're going to get a nice chili pot, soup pot, something that's got a nice heavy bottom to it.
Okay.
You don't want it to scorch.
So we have our venison.
We have the venison.
And what are our next steps?
We've diced up some onion, minced up some garlic, and fine diced up some jalapeno peppers. So because the venison is so lean, we actually need to start it off with a little bit of olive oil. You want it to get nice and hot. You want to hear that sizzle when the meat goes in.
So the venison is going to carry the entire dish through, not really the spices or the vegetables itself.
It's all going to come together. So we've got our onions, got our garlic, and we've got our jalapeno. The reason it's called chili is because of the chili powder that we're adding to it. And not only is this going to give it flavor, but it's also going to help thicken up that broth a little bit. So it might seem like we're adding a ton, but this is actually mild chili powder.
Okay.
So
and how much is in there?
That's about 1/3 of a cup.
Oh wow, that's a lot of chili powder.
A lot of chili powder. That's when it really starts to smell like something. You can see that nice color, you can smell the aroma.
Yes, that smells delicious.
Now it's starting to look like chili.
So it's important actually to add the spices before you add any of the liquids, is that what you're saying?
Definitely. Because there's actual little essential oils within the spices, and that activates the oil and develops the aroma.
Okay.
Translates into flavor. If you have some tomato puree here, this is going to be a little thicker. If you have crushed tomatoes, it's going to have a little more liquid. And now the big debate is beans or no beans in your chili.
I particularly don't like kidney beans, but I like black beans.
Black beans is kind of a little spin we put on this one. A little unique. You don't see black beans in too many chilies, but with the venison, I think it goes really, really well. So the beef broth is going in, about 2 cups. Now we're going to turn this down to a simmer.
Now, how long do you leave your chili simmering?
An hour and a half is kind of the minimum.
Okay.
I mean, it's just one of those recipes where the slower and longer you cook it and reheats really well. You can freeze it. And then since we're trying to be healthy with this today,
okay.
If you're familiar with Greek yogurt, it's going to take the place of the sour cream.
Mm-hmm.
So a little healthier option for you. And then we've got a couple of different salsas. We've got a salsa verde made with the tomatillos.
So this is kind of taking the Mexican twist on chili in a way too, with the jalapeno and a little bit of salsa.
Kind of where the inspiration comes from.
Look at that. Well, Jim, this looks absolutely fantastic,
Thank
healthy,
you.
and I'm
Definitely.
going to steal this bowl of chili, go sit by the fire, and enjoy every bite.
Coming up, our classic takes us back to El Salto Lake in Mexico, where the bass are about as big as a sombrero.
Minnesota Bound, brought to you by Hennepin County Medical Center, bringing outdoor safety tips from the experts at HCMC to your mobile device. Minnesota Agricultural Water Resources Coalition. Minnesota soybean farmers and their checkoff, sharing the real story about responsible, ethical agriculture for life. Visit therealstorymn.com to learn more.
Time now for our Minnesota Bound Classic. You know, if you're like me, you love fishing, but you'd like to get away from the ice once in a while. So I took an adventure to Mexico, to a place called El Salto, where the bass are muy grande. Where'll he go?
Well, he's a little bit closer to 5.
Yeah.
Just one of the regular bass that on a day at El Salto that you can expect to catch.
Expect to catch? Exactly. Bass anglers have no boundaries in their search of largemouth bass. And that explains why we come to places like El Salto.
Well, what do you think?
Hate to say it, but I think yours is a hair bigger.
What about El Salto?
This is El Salto, one of Mexico's newest reservoirs, tucked away in the rugged Sierra Madres, less than an hour's drive from Mazatlan, a popular destination for turistos seeking sun and Pacific beaches. Over the last 15 years, the rising waters of El Salto have turned what used to be fields of cactus into watery haunts for largemouth bass.
Well, I'd heard about it from a lot of my friends, and I just happened to just think, well, I'd better get up there and check it out. And I came here last year, and not only is it probably the best fishery, but it's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been. I got it.
While ancient cemeteries slowly disappear from shore, new fishing camps are springing up as El Salto's big bass reputation spreads north of the Mexican border. The newest camp is El Salto Pro Bass Adventures, headquartered in the Mexican village of La Cruz.
Not as big as it's not a 10.
And managed by a former bass pro, Fred Ward.
It's like about an 8. El Salto produced a lot of fish for a lot of years, but they were only small, maybe up to 5-6 pounds. And then just 2 years ago, it began to develop 10 and 12-pound bass, just all of a sudden. And now it's the best fishery in the world.
A day of fishing at El Salto begins at dawn like a Mexican fiesta.
Oh, he's a jumper, wasn't he? El Salto bass.
Hit a fish.
The shores of El Salto may say Mexico, but the El Salto bass act like bass anywhere, at home under flotillas of hydrilla and swimming amid flooded timber.
Oh, J-Money.
I lost them. No barbs. I gotta remember that. No slack line. They're all gonna get off. It was cool though. As we explored more of El Salto, as we flipped worms or twitched topwater lures, the evidence was mounting. If heaven's a bass lake, it might be in Mexico.
There ain't anything like it.
All right. Now it was high noon on El Salto, and my time was running out. Then, one more cast.
There he is. Get him, buddy. Here's your fish.
My fish. He's got shoulders on him. Oh man, I'll tell you what. Oh, man.
Let's put the scale on this puppy. Okay.
13-1.
13-1. The largest bass of my fishing days was now in the book.
Well, that's what you came for, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
El Salto, muy grande. The memories. Wouldn't mind being back there right now. Thank you, Raven. Well, that about does it for us. Remember, introduce the kid to the great outdoors. I'm Ron Schara, and of course, always the star of the show. It's Raven. You know it, too.
Guests appearing on Minnesota Bound receive gift certificates to Crave Restaurants. Fresh, vibrant, American. Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433. For more information on these stories and more, catch us on the web at mnbound.com.